Hi, Tanner.
Morning, Milo.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you just well. Just fine. I just got done with a little webinar for a customer of ours, so sorry I'm a little late here logging on.
No, that's fine. Uh, Maybe you could introduce yourself to Robbie a bit. He's a
Yeah.
rice miller and been in the family tradition for many, many years, his company.
All right, on. Well, morning, Robbie. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Um, yeah. Well, thanks for taking some time for us this morning. So I'm an economist at CoBank, and one of the markets I watch, or the sectors I watch, is rice.
Okay.
And um, our customers are folks like Rice Linden producers, and getting more into CPG, even. And so over the past really almost several months, if not a year, we've been looking at this question of really what's going on in rice. What's the long term future? The clear trend is, as you know, we're continually seeing rice imports go up year after year,
Mhm.
especially the fragrant rice
Right.
varieties. And our acreage hasn't really kept pace with that. And so that begs the question, okay, what's the future of the rice industry? Are we going to continue to cede more and more of our market share over to imports? And if so, where's the risk slash opportunity in this dynamic? Uh,
Right.
can the can the U.S. rice industry capture this, and if so, how? And does a lender need to be involved ultimately? Does anybody need CoBank in this transition? Is kind of our approach. What's
Right.
the future? What's the future look like for our customers, and what does that mean for banking
Right.
ultimately? So Milo and I have been collaborating on this project now for a while, since January at least, right, Milo, or earlier,
Right.
and gathering a lot of information, and mostly talking with folks up and down the supply chain, traders around the world, getting their ideas of what's going on, specifically with fragrant rice and why we're seeing this trend of increasing fragrant rice consumption. And then also we're trying to get a handle of what's driving it too, who is driving it.
Right.
Are these ethnic consumers, descendants, or recent immigrants, descendants of immigrants? Are they, your non-ethnic, we'll say Caucasian consumers that are wanting, an experience with their food? This is something we've seen with other sectors. Like an example, I've talked about with Milo. In the animal protein sector, we have this long-term shift of consumers leaving white breast chicken meat and going over to dark meat because they want that flavorful experience with their food. And then also it's the ethnic drive,
Right.
uh, the ethnic population rising in the U.S. So our question is, okay, is that the same thing here? Is it just the same thing? Is it the same model? Are we seeing more and more a shift out of the traditional white meat and white rice and going over to more flavorful or more ethnic cuisine? And who is doing it? Is it kind of everybody? It kind of seems that way.
Right.
Uh, that's kind of our feeling. It's a little bit of everybody doing it, ethnic and
Right.
non-ethnic.
Right.
But that's kind of where we're at right now. It's
Okay. Well, yeah, I
and
definitely have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, we'd love to get your thoughts see
We're
how far
so
we
glad
can.
to hear that.
I think it's pretty simple. I do agree with you. It's a little bit of both. I think the aromatic, the Thai jasmine, I think one of its biggest appeal, I think it's like any business. Every business has like a volume customer, right? That you're constantly going, that they're going to be there, all that stuff. I think a lot of that I think your Asian population is growing in the country. And I think they're just buying what they grew up on, and they're looking for Thai jasmine. That's what they grew up on in Thailand and in Asia and all that. And that's that. So in order for us to combat that, we have to do an education part. And the white and just the normal white Caucasian, they don't eat a lot of rice. It's not in their normal diet. So in order for us to change that, we have to send that message out. And until the U.S. rice industry does a big campaign or a big messaging campaign, in my opinion, similar to what potatoes or what avocados did or something like that, we're not going to change domestic consumption to that effect. I mean, you go around the country and a lot of people don't even know we grow rice in America.
Yeah.
They all think it's from Thailand or Asia. And so that's a problem. I think the industry has, we've exported half of the rice to, countries, and we've been able to keep the mills busy and keep the rice going that way. And that's what the industry focuses on. The industry is not, as a whole, it's expensive to get the message out, and the industry is very hesitant to do that. So,
Right. Okay. One rice miller we spoke with said they think it's a quality issue, that we've got so many hybrids here in the U.S. or rice varieties here in the U.S. They get commingled, that the discerning rice consumer buys up and gets jasmine instead. Just may or may not. They may not be wanting just jasmine. They just want a higher quality rice that cooks better and is longer grain and less chalk.
right.
Is that part of the scenario as well?
That's part of it as well. I also believe that is a bigger problem on the export side. So what's happening is we're sending hybrids out to other countries, and then you got cheaper varieties coming in from Vietnam or whatever that have much better quality. So we're trying to send a lesser quality product at a more expensive price on the export side. And that's why, in my opinion, that's why we're hanging on an MOU from Iraq to keep our rice moving.
Right.
Because in other words, they would not buy it because we're more expensive and the quality's worse.
Right.
That's a bigger problem than the domestic problem, in my opinion.
Okay.
And if we were to sell more domestic rice, we would have better varieties, because we would not, pricing would not be so price sensitive, right? I mean, everybody's trying to get the most yield and everybody's trying to get the cheapest price out there to be able to compete,
Right. Is there I mean, with all of these rice varieties out there, is there a chance for that to ever change? I know there's a new variety out there. Is it from Nutrien, Milo?
Yes, there's a new variety, Robbie, growing up largely in Arkansas, Missouri, called
Okay.
DG 232 or something like that.
Right.
And it's
I'm not really familiar with it. All I know is that the yields of the hybrids are so much more than anything else out there that the guys could even take a hit on deduction wise on quality, and they still make more money because they have more rice. So that, and the biggest issue is, I mean, the biggest issue, the industry, the millers can say, hey, we don't want to take it. But our problem is our biggest mills are co-ops, and you can't blame the boards who are farmers saying, this is what we want to grow, this is how we're going to move it. I can't blame them for that. I mean, they're going to make more money doing that, but eventually it's going to go away, in my opinion, because you can't keep sending bad quality out with a higher price, and that just doesn't work.
The variety I mentioned, I know Randy Oots with Nutrien, and
Yeah.
he's been talking to me about it. I don't know what it would do in Louisiana. There's lots of problems growing rice in different areas of the South, depending upon the climate, like the Gulf blast and everything. I understand the complexity of that. But this variety, if it grabs, even if it only grabs in Arkansas, produces a yield about equal with hybrid, but without
That would be great
for the seed.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if it's what's being happening in Louisiana. I mean, Dr. Linscomb is just down the road from me about an hour and a half. We'll go back and talk to him again. But if something like that could happen, that might change a little bit what we're talking about. But that's all in the sky right now.
You got to have the yields. We got to have yield and quality. And right now we have yields, but we don't have quality. And they're going to go to yields first. And I can't blame that model. I can complain about it all I want. I can tell you I have customers complain about it. I can tell you it's bad. I mean, it's slow in my mill. It tears up equipment. I can tell you all about that. I can tell you all the reasons why I don't want to do it. But the fact of the matter is, the people I'm buying from, the higher yield makes the numbers work. And I cannot blame that. but it is concerning. But if we have another variety out there that has the quality of some of our conventionals and things like that with the yield, that'll fix our problem.
Because of the pandemic, I haven't been able to get down to El Campo and talk with Doc, who's a Chinese breeder. I know Randy well and I trust him. I know Jared Hartke and he's running through a lot of tests there. And at least on the agronomic side in Central and North Arkansas, it works pretty well. And it will be increased dramatically next year.
Okay.
But there's still problems there because the jasmine is lower yield. People that are bottom line oriented, you know some of them over in your area that are growing jasmine. Their banker loves it. They love it because it's not the yield, it's the bottom line that's so good.
Right.
And it's not a big market, but it's there. We talked to a miller not too far from you that said the acreage actually got up to 30,000 acres and then cratered because of some of the things that you are marketing us know about. But the millers that have it in California and the South say it's their fastest moving product. I don't know if that's true with you. Do you market jasmine as a brand? Or
Yes. Yeah, we have a jasmine rice on our label. And yeah, and we market it on the retail shelf. On the retail side, we have success with it for sure. Food service, you still have the stigma of it's not Thai jasmine. I mean, a lot of buyers. I tell people this story all the time. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I went to a big retailer and I went through a 10-minute speech about LSU developed it. It's from Louisiana. It's got text and texture is pretty much identical. It may be a little bit shorter than the Thai jasmine, but it's grown here and it's good. First question out of his mouth, does it have the Thai seal? I'm like, what do you mean it has a, no, I just told you for the last 10 minutes that it's grown in Louisiana. Oh, my customers want the Thai seal. I mean, just like that.
It's the elephant?
It's the elephant, yeah.
Huh.
It's that seal, and I think, and that's what makes me think. I think it's more of, it is a lot of both. You're right, but I think it's more of just people moving in the country and wanting what they grew up on, and so they're going to buy. I mean, it's no different if you or I were to move to another country. You're going to try and find foods from where you grew up from, and if you find a product or a label, like if I'm in another country and I find Tony Sashry seasoning or something, right? I'm buying that over the local stuff because that's what I grew up on. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah. Well, to your point, something's happening in the US and North America that's not happening in Latin America, because we've talked to several people involved in the trading and milling in South America in this journey. And there really is diddly squat aromatics down there.
Right.
Actually, the consumption in Brazil has caved in. They've all gone over to pasta.
Oh, wow.
And everything. And I don't believe there's really all that much domestic marketing of rice like we have in this country. They don't tend to spend the money. Well, they didn't have to spend the money because all the poor were eating rice. But now,
Right.
As the incomes go up, the consumption goes down. Well,
Right.
we've been high income for a long time, so that's not a factor. And so the ethnic thing is probably correct, but maybe it's gotten to the point where it's drawing people out of potatoes and pasta into rice, perhaps because it's romantic. It's got an interesting story behind it. I don't know.
Right.
I'm asking. The people that I've talked to, other than you, basically have said we're not sure what the demand is, what's happening on the demand side. But you're saying it's totally ethnic, so okay.
Well, I think that's a big piece of it. I think that's a big piece of the driver. I mean, if you look at, and I don't have numbers to back this, but I would look, I mean, I bet that if you watch the population growth of Asian Americans in this country, I would bet that the growth of aromatics would coincide with it.
Can we get a data point like that, do you think, Tanner?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so
And that's a total guess. I mean, I don't have any numbers to prove this,
I understand.
but I would just, if you're asking me, that's what I would think. And I think if you're going to turn and I do think that I do think Americans that are converting over from potatoes or something to rice, I think the first thing they do look at is aromatics because it's something different. no different than Chipotle seasoning, right? I mean, that was a big kick, right? Everybody wanted, and Tabasco has the same problem, right? I mean, they used to be the only hot sauce out there. Well, now everybody has a palate for it. And so their biggest problem is they have to figure out how to be relevant in the deal.
So you quasi Latin American cooking through Chipotle Grill and things like that. But and so you got the ethnic restaurants, and then you have the restaurants that are sort of mixed between ethnic and us, and that's the way the food business develops, where foreign
Right.
begin to come into the U.S. for people that weren't raised on those things.
Right. And in my opinion, I know it's probably simple, but I think if, obviously advertising is expensive, and to do it right, you have to spend a bunch of money, which is really scary. And I get all that. Well, I don't know if the industry does have the money, but basically, if we were to let every single American know that rice was grown in America, that would help turn the needle. But you have to get to all that part. And I don't necessarily think you have to do it in the major markets, which is expensive, but I think if you go to middle America in those areas and just say, hey, we have American grown rice, that would help change the needle. And those people, I mean, yes, they may go to Thai jasmine, but if you tout that we have US long grain and it can be a part of your diet and this and that, I think they would go to it.
I've seen your business on the website. I've talked to you, and I've watched you both as a friend and as a participant in the market. You have some ability to market what you've got is from Louisiana and Cajun and
Right.
all. Do you think that helps your sales?
Well, I mean, my biggest customer base is in Louisiana. So,
So you're
and
selling to your people. Okay.
yeah, I mean, look, I'm a regional brand. I mean, I do sell all over the South,
Uh-huh.
but I'm no different than anybody else. I mean, my big customer base is from South Louisiana, but they eat rice. I mean, if my place was in Arkansas, I couldn't market the way I market. They don't eat rice.
Gotcha.
That's another thing. If Arkansas were to slam Arkansas and say, hey, we have rice grown in Arkansas, that's a no-brainer to me. I mean, the fact that they don't eat rice in Arkansas, I don't understand that,
Well, yeah, but you've got really good cuisine down there.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't need to get personal about it, but
yeah,
we always used to go over to trade rice in the exchange in New Orleans, and we'd go out and deliberately try and find a bad restaurant. We never found one.
yes. Yeah, and we're lucky. I mean, I know we're lucky, and I know it's not as simple as that, but I think that for the most part, if people know that this is grown in your backyard and it's helping out your local economy, they're going to buy it.
I know a mill up in northern Missouri. We haven't talked to them yet, where they go hand to mouth. They go directly against the ethnics in these markets, and they're winning with their jasmine up there.
Yeah,
They take the time to go to where they need to go to tell the story, but
right.
to get across to the mass of people, I mean, we would spend $100 million on a campaign at Oklahoma.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you'd have to spend. Yes, it would be that. I mean, we spent last year in domestic promotions, we spent $500,000 and went to 7 smaller markets.
Very targeted.
And it was and that's all the money we had, but it was a very effective campaign. We had people that actually recognized our messaging without prompting.
What was the message, Robbie?
It was start with rice and start with US grown rice, brought to you by American farmers. And, it was basically touted the nutritional benefits and the things you could do with rice, the way you could substitute it in recipes that you currently have.
Yeah.
It was mainly start with rice. It's a meal. It can feed a lot of people. It's inexpensive, things like that.
Yeah. If we were to tell a story about the situation now, what might you add to the conversation of the story?
Well, I do think there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, I'm not doom and gloom about the rice industry. I think that I think we obviously have a domestic market. I mean, half of the rice is sold here. So, I mean, it's not like nobody in the country is eating rice. I do believe that we have a big population of the country that we can help turn the needle. And how to do that, there's no great answer to that. It's just expensive. And so should we do it? I don't know. I mean, you could do it and it falls flat on our face, and then next thing you know, we don't have anything left. But you know, I think that we've been able to move our crop. We've been able to grow our crop. We've been able to move our crop. And that's really job number one of what you're trying to do. The question is, what do we do about the future? And I know that the breeders know that we need better quality. And I know that they have been trying to get that as much as they can. So hopefully they'll find something and they'll hit on something. And I think that would help for sure.
So the problem with the hybrid and the quality of the hybrid is almost a separate issue from aromatic rices.
Yes.
It's a question of long grain quality and what people accept here and overseas.
Right. Right. The other thing, you know, the other thing that's different about Jasmine, the other thing that makes the quality so great, it's one variety. Anytime you pack one variety, that makes your quality way better because it's normally pretty consistent in my mind. And so when we're dealing long grain, we're not only putting, you're co-mingling everything. You know, if I have hybrid in there, I'm mingling it with stuff because I can't just run just hybrid through my mill. It slows everything down. So, you know, you got a bunch of different varieties in that bag with long grain.
A couple of points from other millers, one north of you, is that she said the same thing you did, that there are varieties of long grain that will sell very well if they can be maintained as long grain through the marketing, through the process.
Yes.
That's an interesting point.
But we have a great story to tell. I mean, we just got to tell it. And I don't know.
Is there a way to get that consistency, do you think, Robbie, if you know, one of the millers had indicated to us that they think that they need the big guys like Riceland producers to just say, okay, these are the varieties we're going to take, and this is what you have to grow, and that's going to drive the industry over to better quality. But the problem is that co-ops have to take the grain.
Exactly.
Exactly. So is there a chance there for the industry to say, okay, these are the 2 or 3 varieties, and we'll pay a premium for these 2 or 3 varieties. Everything else is going to get dumped in another pit and sent over to.
So California, for instance, basically does that with their varieties. You know, they say, hey, we're growing this, and these are the varieties we want to take. But in the South, it's so price sensitive on the export side, you just can't do that. And I mean, we'd have to have all the mills say, this is what we're doing. And has been tried, that has been talked about, that has been talked about to death. But you'd have to have every mill with a buy-in. And but if people say, you know, Supreme even tried to do different pricing for hybrids and all that. But what happens is one mill doesn't, then you're missing out on rice.
Riviana's done the same approach, but I don't know how successful they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's good for a little while. I mean, you can do it in certain years when you have a big crop.
Yeah.
But when you, like this year, you're going to take whatever you can get.
Right.
I've been in the market 40 years, Robbie. And when I worked for Uncle Ben's, I had $100 million purchase for rice. So I would go into the breeder shops and I'd say, I understand you're working on XYZ. Can you send me a sample? And they'd say, sure. So I'd send the sample to our labs in England, which are some of the best labs in the world, the Mars Rice Labs. And they'd come back and say, we really can't use this variety, Milo. So I'd go back to the breeders and I'd say, I got some bad news for you. We can't use the variety. So as you develop it, you have to take into consideration that you will lose 30% of the non-co-op demand for rice in the United States.
Yeah.
That had a huge impact on people and it kept everything in check. But once people like Uncle Ben's and really to some extent Riviana vacated the industry in the form they were prior to year 2000, everything became like corn, where you just commingled it. And up in Arkansas, where they trade rice on a merchandising basis, I mean, I tried to do it. I did it up in Missouri when I supplied rice to Europe out of the New Madrid mill that we'd reconstructed.
Right,
It was going to cost the company an extra $75 a year to variety specific out of that area. And they didn't go for it.
right,
They just wouldn't go for it. I was surprised at the cost of variety specific inventory for a full crop year rice. I just never thought about it because we did a lot of it with the farmers. The farmers got paid quickly and they liked selling to Uncle Ben's and they knew we were around for the long haul. And
right.
I premium sometimes. But in this world today, it's the marketing chain has turned rice basically into a corn ingredient type situation in many areas.
Right. And, we're, the also thing that's interesting about the market is, we have in this country, we have, aromatics, we have ethnic groups, and, the Asians obviously love um, the Thai jasmine. And then you have a huge Hispanic population. We're shipping a lot of rough rice down to Mexico. It's not even being milled here. So there's a lot of arguments whether that's a good thing or bad thing for the industry, but I think that's really interesting. I mean, I think if you look at the rice market in Louisiana, we grow about the same amount of rice, and whether or not Arkansas has a bumper crop or Arkansas has a small crop, we
Yeah.
always run out of rice.
Why is that? Because you're on the Gulf Coast?
We're on the Gulf Coast, and whatever doesn't get milled gets shipped out in rough rice.
Yeah. Someone told me that the aromatic market, particularly jasmine in this country, is about the size of the acreage in Louisiana.
I would that's a lot of rice. I mean, I certainly don't grow near that much compared to what I do in long grain.
No, I'm just saying that the overall
It could
market
be. It
for
could be.
consumption in this country is about the size of the acreage.
Oh, if you consider if you consider imports.
It's all about imports. That's what
Yeah, I would agree with that then. Yeah, I would say that that's probably right.
that's kind of just hit me. That was one of the comments that just hit me in this whole
Right.
journey through the industry.
Well,
So-
and if we were to change US consumption just a couple pounds, that would take up all the rice that we grow.
Right.
If you look at the statistics, I was really shocked, and I'm not going to go through graphs with you, but I had no idea. I heard complaints by millers in Brazil that their domestic market is going away. And then I did the analysis, and for the since 1980, which is about what 30 years, the market in this country has gone up almost every year.
Yeah.
In this country, and there were some hiccups recently, but generally been going up, and the imports have been going up as well. In Brazil, there's no bloody imports other than just to run rice through and out the country from Paraguay or something. There's no domestic consumption of that rice so much, and their domestic consumption went from a high back in the early 2000s. It's down 2 million metric tons in that period of time. And I asked them why, and they said because they're eating pasta and potatoes and pizzas and everything, and they look upon rice as an inferior type thing that you want to get out of, not into. And but I don't think they spend a lot of money because they have a huge country that eats a lot of rice, and they don't need to market it. It's just there.
Right.
What you have is a phenomenon in North America and in the US, which is unique, which has to go back to your comments about the ethnics, because you don't see a friend of mine put it very bluntly, he said, the Asians don't come down here because there's so much more money and possibility in the North America than here. They don't flock in here to do business and make money because it's not there.
Right.
I don't know whether they're true or not, but there's a lot of perceptions out there. But the thing that's a shocker to me is if you compare the Americas, Central and South America versus North America, the whole phenomenon of Asian imports is located there. Now, Cuba imports rice from Vietnam, but that's a communist consideration, really more.
Yes.
And so there is not the growth in demand for rices down there. And if they come in, they don't like them because they're low priced and they compete with their distribution chains.
Mhm.
So in the end, if they don't like our rice, they'll start buying it from South America, which logistically is not as good as the US, but I don't think that Vietnam's going to take over the Mexican market. I may be wrong, but I don't think so.
It seems Mexico likes our rice, whether they buy it rough or whatnot. It is concerning that they're buying more and more rough rice as opposed to milled rice. But as a miller, it's concerning as a miller. But they are buying rice, and they continue to buy rice. So even with all the hybrids and the pricing and all that stuff. So I agree with you. I think they like doing business with us. I think it's easy, it's convenient. So I don't necessarily see that going away. The biggest thing that changes the needle and whether or not is whether or not Iraq buys. That's a huge number. Last year they didn't buy much at all, and we were able to move the rice.
You know why they may be buying now, whereas they didn't a year ago?
I'm not sure.
It's-
It's interesting because they've just had a recent shift to where they used to buy by the grain board, and then the grain board basically gave the purchasing power to a third party, which everybody's concern was that's all going to be about pricing. We're out. But apparently they've met and they've kind of made some agreements, and they're looking to buy. So it's interesting. I mean, it's one of those things you got to. I mean, obviously, you got to get some political pressure in there to get them to buy, which that happens when you're government to government. So, but that's how it's been. And I personally, I will say, I got a caveat. I don't personally deal with Iraq, so I'm just telling you what I hear and what I read about the situation.
So in principle, the Louisiana at least, and maybe Arkansas and California could get a chunk of this jasmine business if their cards went the right way.
Yeah.
And it's growing. It's not stopped growing yet. Everyone says it's about played out, but I'm not sure if it is.
Oh, no. I mean, I think if you look over the last 10 years, when we were doing our deal, I want to say imports were like 10%, 15 years ago or something. And now they're getting close to 20% now. I don't see that stopping. I mean, that's why you got to grow the pie bigger. I think it's growing, and I think if we grow the pie, we're going to grow U.S. rice. I mean, you're going to grow imports too, but if you keep growing U.S. rice at a higher rate than imports, who cares?
You can invest in something that's a growing demand base for whatever reason it is. But if you've got no growing demand base and just a tasty rice, then it becomes like Italian mushrooms. It's got a limited audience, and that's the end of it. But this thing is getting to almost a critical mass. It's interesting because last year, Jessica and Tanner and I went through the data. They are now identifying the rice in terms of type of rice, jasmine, basmati, all of that.
Yes.
Sorry, I've got my office assistant here, guys.
Oh yeah, that's all good, man. We all have little kids, man.
That's Greta.
Yeah.
I've never met her, but I've seen her on Zoom. So
I'll be right back. I got to take her upstairs.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So the long and short of it is we're trying to look for the story, and there seems to be relationships here. And there's several problems with the U.S. rice industry. One of them is that hybrid is such a fantastic yielder that it's going to be difficult to dislodge that variety from the U.S. scene.
Yes.
Unless this variety I told you about has some application, and it may not have application in Louisiana because of the diseases and everything you have.
Right.
And it's for sure that California produces a noticeably good jasmine, but they don't have any bugs. They don't have any disease. They're just a different world out there.
Yeah, they're able to dictate what they want to do because they can offer a good enough price. They have, and granted, I'm talking in generalities. They export a lot to Japan, and that business is there. It's definitely a much more solid business than what we have on the export side. And when you have those situations, you can dictate a lot of things of what you want to do and what you want to grow. You can make it work for everybody. When you're not sure where it's going the next year, you can't really dictate a lot on our end on the South.
You got machinery that can produce $20 premiums for regular rice. Then you can mess around with specialty rices, even if they're not quite as high in return. But
Right.
yeah, I think we're getting to the point, I don't know what it is, where we're seeing a lot of interest in this. When people, nobody said this is a boring subject, don't even study it. No one's told us that. And
Yeah.
so that encourages us to get the job done and get it out. It'll be about 5 pages, and it won't be a PhD report. You probably
Right.
read, what, 10, 15 minutes, something like that.
Right.
Yeah, we try to keep it pretty focused, 5 or 6 pages.
That's good.
Nobody reads long reports anymore. No one has the time.
And they're coming out all over the world, really long reports that I wanted to read this, but I never got around to it.
Right.
This kid was screaming or something like that.
Attention spans. You got me for like 2 minutes. That's about it.
3 minutes on a good day.
Yeah. But no,
Um,
I definitely think it's a great story. I mean, I think everybody from my dealings with the industry, nobody is against trying to grow domestic consumption, and nobody is against trying to go against imports. What everybody is trying to figure out how to do that, because every answer that we come up with is a big number, and that's scary to everybody. And it happens, and you can't. It's not like, so on the export side, if you spend some money on some promotion, or you get governments involved and things like that, you can move the whole crop in a year. Well, if we're going to start trying to do domestic consumption, you really have to be in it for 5 to 10 years, because it's not like you can change it overnight. You have to like change next generation is what you have to do.
That's what
Yeah.
Uncle Ben's did.
Right.
On a generational basis, we spent 150 million a year. There are not many companies in the US that are in rice that can even begin to approach those numbers.
Right. Right.
It's not cheap. The shelf space is very expensive.
Shelf space is very expensive. Yes. And it's, I tell people all the time, it's like real estate. Once you got it, what are you going to do with it? And it's a consignment sale.
Do you have any sense as to whether Walmart buyers are now going for jasmine and walking away from US rice? Or do they even have any control over what they sell?
I don't know that Walmart buyers are changing to jasmine. Look, I think the typical Walmart buyer is looking at price. And if they're looking at price, they're not going to jasmine.
It's too high priced. Okay.
So on the domestic side, what I'm seeing is I'm seeing a shift from branded product to store brand. I think the stores are all saying, look, we don't need the national. I mean, we need the national brands, but really shoppers are coming to our store because they want to come to our store. They want to come to Louisiana's Rouse's, or in Texas, people go to HEB because that's a Texan thing, right? So HEB is probably, if you notice, there's more HEB products than there was 5 years ago.
And HEB shows all these films of ranchers and farmers in
Yes.
Texas growing stuff in Texas. And
Right.
you're absolutely correct. That's exactly where they're very active when there's disasters. Most
Right.
people remember HEB showed up when the floods came in along the Gulf Coast.
Right.
And others don't do so much.
So,
They're very
so
community-minded there. Yeah, I think they've done an outstanding job of installing themselves in Texas. I agree.
right. So retailers now are saying, look, I don't need your brand. I need the product.
One of the problems in Arkansas is you don't have any cities, whereas in Texas we have million people cities all over the place that can spend the money and get the people. Even at least you got New Orleans in Louisiana,
Right.
whereas there isn't anything like New Orleans except maybe Memphis in Arkansas, and that's really just like in Tennessee. So
Right.
I think
Right.
that's probably the basic problem. It's way too rural,
Way too rural. Yeah.
whereas California is not at all that way.
Right. But to get back to the store brand thing, I think a lot of that store brand is all about price, and they do have some aromatic. The store brands are starting to put in aromatic rice, and some of them are actually starting to put in American grown jasmine or things like that. They're starting to differentiate with that, and so we're seeing some growth in that.
So I got one more question for you if you got a moment on
Yeah,
back to the ethnic consumers. Is it one of our Miller friends we were talking with was saying it's not just Asian. They think it's everybody, especially Latino.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I think anybody you're getting to convert from either pasta or regular long grain, that they're so jasmine has it's something different, right? That's why I think the food service likes it so much, because it's not that they're putting rice on their menu, they're putting jasmine rice, which has a much better it's something different. It's something people, oh yeah, I want to try that. Whereas if they just said, hey, I've got, steak and it's over a bed of rice, they can say, I've got steak and it's over this aromatic jasmine rice, and it's just a completely different taste structure. But it also goes to the point, jasmine also highlights the point that we eat with all of our senses, right? So, what do things taste? I mean, things taste, and it's like when you got a cold, right? Oranges don't taste right because you can't smell them.
Yep.
And so when you take all the different varieties that we have, aside from jasmine, the differences in all our varieties are the texture. It's not the taste really. It's how it feels when it hits your mouth. That's what people are looking for. But then you add jasmine in there and it adds an aromatic that just has a whole nother taste profile. And that's why I think it's very popular in food service and things like that, because the restaurants can actually put that on their menu, that it's not only rice, it's jasmine rice. And
Right.
so that's why I say, I'm not saying it's all because of the ethnic. I just think that's a huge part of it.
Right.
Sure, it never happened without the ethnic, because nobody wastes the time to sell their rice from Asia into the US and go through all the hassles that are involved in doing that.
Right. That's kind of like their day-to-day business that's going to be there. That's their volume business, the ethnic side. So now that you have that, you have time to expand on growing it elsewhere. Does that make sense? If you didn't have the volume business, you usually don't go into something because I can't pay the bills every month. Well, we have a huge Asian population that chances are will buy it if they know if it's got that Thai seal on it, because that's from their homeland. So you got some sales. So then you can start working on growing it.
No other way. Any other questions? Anybody?
This has been fantastic, Robbie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Tanner.
Take care.
Okay, all right.
See ya. Bye.